Hi guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. It's so greatly appreciated, truly is. Before we get started, let me give you my usual disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only. Please do not take what I say as fact. Please always do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Next. If you have not liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so. It really helps me out and I really appreciate it. And last, a huge thank you to my subscriber, Jason Brown, for bringing this case to my attention and for picking me to be the one to cover it. I know you hold this case close to your heart, so I hope I do you proud. 54-year-old Jennifer Jo Smith was born on January 11th, 1955, to parents Ronald and Mary. She lived in Mountain City, Tennessee, before deciding to move to Cookeville, Tennessee in the summer of 2006. Cookeville is situated to the east of Nashville and is surrounded by some of the most beautiful attractions. These include more than 150 waterfalls, an expansive shoreline, amazing restaurants, and a scenic brick road. Jennifer was a very religious person that loved quilting, cross-stitching, and making soap. She was also the proud mother of 2 children, a son named Christopher and a daughter named Eliza. After she arrived in Cooksville, she moved into a trailer that was located on Buck Mountain Road. Jennifer worked as a home health aide, and by all accounts, she seemed like a wonderful woman. Her next-door neighbors would be a couple named Stephenbaker and Carrie Diane Speck. And it wouldn't take long for Carrie and Jennifer to become friends. Jennifer was always helping her neighbors out. She even allowed Stephen and Carrie to get water from her place and take it to theirs when their water pipes would freeze in the winter. And she also made them candy for Christmas. Prior to 2008, Carrie Smith was married to another man, and she worked as an aide in the Putnam County schools. Stephen was her drug dealer during this time before the two fell in love. Carrie would end up divorcing her husband and going to live with Stephen. Stephen worked as a drug dealer and a thief. It is what it is. That was his job. He was a drug dealer and a thief. The couple would steal items from their local Walmart, return the items for gift cards, and then they would pawn the gift cards for pennies on the dollar. They would end up becoming addicted to, let me say this right, dilaudid pills, which is known as hydromorphone, in 2009. The drug is a prescription pain reliever that is 2 to 8 times more potent than morphine and very highly addictive. So it's no joke. It's no joke. But as their addiction became more expensive, they had to find more ways to fund their habits. Obviously, right? Makes sense. This is typically the case with most, if not all, people who struggle with addiction. That's when Stephen, the little fucking gem that he is, came up with the plan to rob the next door neighbor and friend that had been so good to them for the past 4 years. January 8th, 2010, Baker instructs his girlfriend to go over to Jennifer's home, asks to use her phone, and stand watch until he gets there. So that's what she does. With friends like this, who needs fucking enemies, right? When Carrie goes over, Jennifer answers the door, and without hesitation, she lets her in. Of course, this is like her best friend. Carrie sits down on the chair, and she begins to stall by pretending to have a conversation on the phone. When Stephen finally arrives, he knocks on the door, and Jennifer lets him in, because why wouldn't she, right? These are her friends. These are her next door neighbors and her friends for 4 years. She tells him to go sit down on the couch. Assuming that she was just going to spend a few hours hanging out with her next door neighbors and what she thought were her friends. But if that were the case, we wouldn't be here right now, would we? Carrie, who would become the state's star witness, testified that as soon as Stephen was inside of the trailer, he grabbed Jennifer and he stabbed her in the neck with a screwdriver. From there, he pulled out the knife that he had brought with him as well and continued to Jennifer. But Stephen's knife was too dull, so he went into Jennifer's kitchen and he grabbed one of hers. Jennifer was still alive at this point, so Stephen decides to search the home for a new weapon. That's when he finds a hatchet. He walks back over to Jennifer and he begins to hit her over the head with it until she stops breathing. It would later come out from Carrie that Jennifer's last words to Stephenbaker were, "I'll pray for you." They ransack the home and leave with a television, $8 cash from her purse, and the keys to her car that they drive away in. From there, they go to a pawn shop and they sell a gift card, but they decide to keep the television for somebody that's willing to pay more than the pawn shop's offering. From there, they go to a store and they buy a carton of cigarettes with Jennifer's credit card. Then they drive to a lake and they dump the weapons, the murder weapons. They go back to Jennifer's home and they look for more things to steal for money. They grab Jennifer's bank card, and inside of her closet, they find the PIN number to the card. It's terrible. At 5:51 p.m., Carrie is seen on surveillance at the ATM machine. I don't know if she realized that ATM machines have cameras. Using Jennifer's card and PIN, she first checks the balance in the account, which is $160, and then immediately withdraws $160 from the account. Later that evening, the two go to visit a man named Jack Huffman. He sold synthetic heroin. Sorry, I can't say it. If you know, you know. And the pain pills that the two were addicted to. They tried to sell him Jennifer's car, which was a red Subaru station wagon, along with her television, to which he replies, "I'm in the business of selling drugs, not taking stolen property." So he's clearly a man with morals. Sorry, I couldn't help it. They go back to the pawn shop and they sell the TV. Then they go buy more pills, and then they finally go home and go to bed because they must be exhausted at this point. They had a jam-packed day. The following morning, January 9th, 2010, Carrie says Stephen woke up to tell her that he had taken care of everything. She says she walked outside. This is just, when I read this, she says she walked outside. And she sees Jennifer's trailer burning to the ground with flames shooting out of the roof. So she goes back inside. She tells Stephen to call 911, which he agrees to do, apparently, and she goes back to bed. What? Once the fire is put out, they find Jennifer laying face down. There's a portion of the back of her skull that's missing and stab wounds all over the front of her body. Along with this, they find evidence of an accelerant being used, and the investigation begins. They first walk around speaking to the neighbors. They walk over to Stephen and Carrie's trailer, obviously, and they knock on the door, but nobody answers. So they try to call them and text them, but again, they refuse to answer. Finally, Carrie decides to come to the door and allow the officers inside the home. She then agrees to sign a consent to search form, which I don't know what she thought she was signing. Did she think that? I mean, all right, granted, they probably would have gotten the warrant anyway, but she didn't know that by signing this form that they were going to most likely find something. Well, they did. They found Stephenbaker and they arrested him on unrelated charges. So there's that. The following morning, they returned to search more. Carrie, again, signs a consent form. This time, it stated that the officers were allowed to collect any clothing or evidence found in the home that may pertain to Jennifer's death. So, they were on the officers' radar almost immediately. It sounds like they were on the officers' radars almost immediately. January 11th, 2010, officers would show up again, and this time they were there to arrest Carrie on unrelated charges. Once at the station, Carrie admits that she lied in her original interview with police because she was fearful of Stephen getting out and hurting her, her family, or her son. That could very well be true. I'm going to give her that. That could absolutely be true. In March of 2010, the evidence gathered from the search warrants would be enough to indict both Stephenbaker and Carrie Speck on multiple charges. 1 count of first-degree murder, 1 count of felony murder, 1 count of aggravated robbery, 1 count of arson, and 1 count of tampering with evidence. Carrie was the state's star witness. I think I told you guys that already, in exchange for a lesser sentence. Okay. The couple's next door neighbor on the other side of their house was a man by the name Harold Harp. So it would be like Harold's house, Stephen's house, Jennifer's house. He would testify that 2 days before the murder of Jennifer, Stephen came to his home and asked to use his phone so that he could call his girlfriend. He said that he gave Stephen the phone. Stephen dialed, stood there for a minute, and then told him, quote, "She must be mad at me. She's not going to answer the phone." He handed him back the phone, then stood there for another minute, then turned and went back to his trailer. Carrie was at her dealer's house at this time, and she didn't answer the call because when it came through as the neighbor's phone number, she knew that it was Stephen on the other end. She didn't want to talk to him. After she returns home, she ends up taking an Uber from the dealer's house back home. After she returns home, Stephen tells her that the real reason he went over to Harp's residence that day was so that he could kill him and rob him. Going on to tell her that the only reason he did not follow through with it is because Mr. Harp had company at his house at the time. Or he would have been gone too. The state introduced evidence that the blood found on Stephen's boots was tested and came back as a match to Jennifer's DNA profile. They also found the 2 knives and the hatchet in the water where Stephen and Carrie dumped it. The medical examiner testified that Jennifer's cause of death was multiple modality trauma. She suffered at least 3 non-fatal stab wounds to the chest, 6 stab wounds to the back, which included a wound that was 3 inches deep and punctured her spinal cord, and the neck injuries, which the screwdriver. Stephenbaker was found guilty on all counts and was ordered to serve a life term for the murder of Jennifer Smith, 12 years for aggravated robbery, 6 years for the arson, and 6 years for tampering with evidence. They're to be served concurrently with each other, but consecutively to the life sentence. Carrie Speck was ordered to serve 30 years for the second-degree charge and 12 years for the aggravated robbery charge. She was ordered to serve 100% of her sentence with the possibility of serving 30% of her aggravated robbery charge. Fair, because if it wasn't for Carrie, they wouldn't know any of this. So, all right, guys, if you're still here, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you and I appreciate you so, so, so very much. If you haven't liked, subscribed, or commented yet, please consider doing so. It really helps me out. I really appreciate it. And until next time, stay safe out there.